Question 1. Research into the implementation of a new client relationship management system at the Bello University's Professional Institute reveals the need for a comprehensive risk assessment. The system will store sensitive personal and financial data of prospective and current students. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for conducting this risk assessment? Option A. Focusing primarily on implementing the latest encryption technologies and firewalls, assuming these technical measures will inherently protect all data. Option B. Relying on the vendor's assurances of data security without independent verification or internal assessment of specific risks. Option C. Performing a quick review of the system's basic functionalities and assuming minimal risk due to the perceived low likelihood of a breach. Option D. Conducting a thorough analysis of potential threats, vulnerabilities, and the likelihood and impact of data breaches, documenting findings, and developing mitigation strategies based on the assessed risks. The correct answer is D. Conducting a thorough analysis of potential threats, vulnerabilities, and the likelihood and impact of data breaches, documenting findings, and developing mitigation strategies based on the assessed risks. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the candidate to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect client confidentiality and ensure data integrity. A hasty or incomplete risk assessment can lead to significant breaches of trust and legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to identify potential threats without overreacting or underestimating risks. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of identifying, analyzing, and evaluating risks associated with the proposed data processing activities. This includes understanding the nature of the data, the potential threats, the vulnerabilities, and the likelihood and impact of a breach. This approach aligns with the principles of data protection and privacy mandated by relevant regulations, which emphasize a proactive and risk-based approach to data security. Specifically, it reflects the spirit of due diligence and responsible data handling expected of professionals. An approach that focuses solely on the technical aspects of data security without considering the broader context of data usage and potential misuse is incorrect. This failure neglects the human element and the potential for insider threats or accidental disclosures, which are significant risk factors. It also overlooks the importance of understanding the purpose for which the data is being processed and the potential impact on individuals if that data is compromised. Another incorrect approach is to rely on assumptions without verification. This can lead to an underestimation of risks, as unexamined assumptions may not reflect the actual threat landscape or the organization's specific vulnerabilities. This lack of thoroughness violates the principle of conducting a comprehensive risk assessment. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy and completeness is fundamentally flawed. While efficiency is important, it should not come at the expense of a robust risk assessment. Incomplete or rushed assessments can miss critical risks, leading to inadequate security measures and potential breaches. This demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and a disregard for the potential harm to individuals and the institution. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured methodology for risk assessment, incorporating stakeholder input, clear documentation, and regular review. Professionals must prioritize understanding the regulatory landscape, identifying all potential risks, evaluating their impact, and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with ethical and legal standards. Question 2. The efficiency study reveals that streamlining client onboarding processes could significantly reduce administrative overhead. However, the proposed changes involve a more automated data collection system and a reduced level of direct human interaction during the initial client engagement phase. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the professional responsibilities and regulatory framework of the AIEP Professional Institute? Option A. Proceed with the automated system, focusing on training staff to handle exceptions and deferring any formal assessment of client impact until after the system has been operational for a full fiscal year. Option B. Prioritize the reduction of administrative costs by adopting the automated system, with a plan to address any client complaints on a case-by-case basis after implementation. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate how the automated system and reduced human interaction affect client service quality, data security, and adherence to AIEP ethical code, and relevant Venezuelan regulations, seeking client feedback, and ensuring adequate oversight mechanisms are in place before full implementation. Option D. Implement the automated system immediately to realize cost savings, assuming clients will adapt to the new process. The correct answer is D. Implement the automated system immediately to realize cost savings, assuming clients will adapt to the new process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the pursuit of operational efficiency with the fundamental ethical and regulatory obligations to clients. The core tension lies in how to implement changes that might improve service delivery or reduce costs without compromising the quality of advice, client confidentiality, or adherence to professional standards. Careful judgment is required to ensure that efficiency gains do not inadvertently lead to regulatory breaches or ethical lapses. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that prioritizes client welfare and regulatory compliance. This means systematically evaluating how proposed changes might affect the quality of service, the security of client information, and the ability of the institution to meet its legal and ethical duties. This approach is right because it aligns with the core principles of professional conduct, which mandate acting in the best interests of clients and upholding the integrity of the profession. Specifically, it reflects the AIEP Professional Institute's commitment to responsible practice, ensuring that any efficiency measures are implemented in a manner that is transparent, client-centric, and fully compliant with the Institute's ethical code and any relevant legislation governing financial advisory services in Venezuela. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the implications for client service quality would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from prioritizing financial outcomes over client well-being, which directly contravenes ethical duties. Another incorrect approach that overlooks the need for robust data security protocols when implementing new technologies would violate client confidentiality and data protection regulations, leading to potential legal repercussions and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach that bypasses necessary stakeholder consultations, particularly with those directly impacted by the changes, e.g., clients or frontline staff, demonstrates a disregard for transparency and due process, which are often implicit or explicit requirements in professional practice guidelines. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the objective, efficiency. This should then be followed by a comprehensive risk assessment, considering potential impacts on clients, regulatory compliance, and ethical standards. The next step involves exploring various implementation strategies, evaluating each against the established criteria of client welfare, regulatory adherence, and ethical integrity. Finally, the chosen strategy should be subject to ongoing monitoring and review to ensure continued compliance and effectiveness. Question 3. Comparative studies suggest that when a client expresses a strong preference for an investment that appears to carry a disproportionately high risk relative to their stated financial objectives and risk tolerance, a financial advisor operating under the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University entrance exams regulatory framework should prioritize which of the following actions. Option A. Advise the client that their preferred investment is too risky and refuse to proceed without further discussion, potentially alienating the client. Option B. Conduct a detailed suitability assessment, clearly explain the risks and potential downsides of the preferred investment, and propose alternative suitable investments that align with the client's objectives and risk profile. Option C. Provide general information about the investment without delving into specific suitability or offering alternatives, leaving the final decision solely to the client. Option D. Execute the client's preferred investment immediately to demonstrate responsiveness to their wishes, assuming the client is fully aware of the risks. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed suitability assessment, clearly explain the risks and potential downsides of the preferred investment, and propose alternative suitable investments that align with the client's objectives and risk profile. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's stated desires and the advisor's fiduciary duty to act in the client's best interest, particularly within the regulatory framework of the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University entrance exam. The advisor must navigate the client's potential lack of full understanding of investment risks and the long-term implications of their choices, while adhering to ethical principles and the specific regulations governing financial advice in this jurisdiction. Careful judgment is required to balance client autonomy with the responsibility to provide sound, informed guidance. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented assessment of the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment objectives. This includes clearly explaining the potential risks and rewards associated with any proposed investment, ensuring the client comprehends this information, and recommending only those investments that are suitable and aligned with their best interests. This aligns with the core principles of client-centric advice and the regulatory obligation to act with diligence and integrity, as mandated by the AIEP Professional Institute's Ethical Code and any applicable financial services laws in its jurisdiction. The emphasis is on informed consent and suitability, ensuring the client's financial well-being is prioritized. An incorrect approach that prioritizes the client's immediate, potentially ill-informed request without adequate due diligence fails to uphold the fiduciary duty. This could lead to unsuitable investments, exposing the client to undue risk and potentially violating regulatory requirements for suitability and client protection. Another incorrect approach, which involves dismissing the client's request outright without attempting to understand the underlying reasons or offering suitable alternatives, demonstrates a lack of client engagement and may not fully explore options that could still meet the client's broader financial goals within acceptable risk parameters. This approach could be seen as paternalistic and failing to adequately serve the client's needs. A third incorrect approach, which involves providing generic advice without tailoring it to the specific client's circumstances, ignores the fundamental principle of personalized financial planning and the regulatory expectation of individualized recommendations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, actively listen to and understand the client's stated needs and concerns. Second, conduct a comprehensive assessment of their financial profile and objectives. Third, educate the client about the implications of various options, including risks and benefits. Fourth, identify and recommend suitable solutions that align with their best interests and regulatory requirements. Finally, document all advice and client interactions thoroughly to ensure transparency and accountability. Question 4. Operational review demonstrates that the internal audit team has uncovered a potential conflict of interest involving a senior executive who also holds significant shares in a key supplier to the university. This executive has been instrumental in approving contracts with this supplier, and the audit team suspects this relationship may have influenced the terms of these contracts, potentially impacting the university's financial statements. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the internal audit team? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive, independent investigation into the executive's financial interests and the supplier contracts, documenting all findings, and then formally report the matter and recommended actions to the audit committee for their review and decision. Option B. Advise the finance department to adjust the valuation of the supplier contracts in the upcoming financial statements to reflect a more conservative estimate, thereby mitigating any potential overstatement. Option C. Immediately inform the executive of the audit team's suspicions and request their voluntary disclosure of any potential conflicts of interest to resolve the matter informally. Option D. Conclude that the potential conflict is a minor issue that does not warrant further investigation, as the executive's involvement in contract approvals is standard practice within the university. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive, independent investigation into the executive's financial interests and the supplier contracts, documenting all findings, and then formally report the matter and recommended actions to the audit committee for their review and decision. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the internal audit team has identified a potential conflict of interest that could compromise the integrity of financial reporting. The challenge lies in balancing the need for timely and accurate financial information with the ethical and regulatory obligation to address conflicts of interest transparently and effectively. The professional must exercise sound judgment to ensure compliance with the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University's ethical guidelines and relevant financial regulations. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of the identified conflict of interest. This includes gathering all relevant facts, understanding the nature and extent of the potential influence, and evaluating its impact on the financial statements. Subsequently, the team must escalate the matter to the appropriate internal authority, such as the audit committee or senior management, and recommend remedial actions to mitigate the conflict and ensure the independence and objectivity of the financial reporting process. This aligns with the AIEP Professional Institute's emphasis on integrity, objectivity, and professional competence, as well as general principles of good corporate governance and financial oversight that require the disclosure and management of conflicts of interest to maintain stakeholder trust and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the findings without proper investigation, assuming the conflict is minor or inconsequential. This fails to uphold the ethical duty of diligence and the regulatory requirement to address potential threats to objectivity. Another incorrect approach is to directly confront the individual involved without following established internal reporting procedures. This bypasses necessary oversight, could lead to an incomplete understanding of the situation, and may not result in appropriate corrective actions, potentially violating internal policies and ethical codes that mandate structured conflict resolution. Finally, an approach that involves altering financial data to conceal the impact of the conflict is a severe ethical and regulatory breach, constituting fraud and undermining the fundamental principles of financial reporting accuracy and transparency. Professionals should approach such situations by first adhering to established internal policies and procedures for identifying and reporting conflicts of interest. This typically involves a systematic fact-finding process, objective analysis of the potential impact, and clear communication through designated channels. The decision-making process should prioritize ethical conduct, regulatory compliance, and the preservation of the integrity of financial information, ensuring that all actions are documented and defensible. Question 5. Regulatory review indicates that a client, Mr. Javier Rodriguez, has expressed a strong desire to invest in a high-risk speculative technology fund that has recently gained significant media attention. Mr. Rodriguez has provided a brief overview of his financial situation, mentioning he has some savings but not detailing his income, expenses, or existing investments. He has explicitly stated he wants to invest a substantial portion of his savings into this specific fund, believing it will yield rapid returns. As an advisor adhering to the AIEP Professional Institute of the Andrés Bello University's entrance exam regulations, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Inform Mr. Rodriguez about the general risks associated with speculative investments and then execute the transaction as per his instructions, assuming he is an informed investor. Option B. Conduct a thorough fact-finding process to understand Mr. Rodriguez's complete financial situation, investment objectives, and risk tolerance before making any recommendation, and then explain the suitability of the technology fund or alternative options. Option C. Immediately recommend a diversified portfolio of low-risk government bonds to protect Mr. Rodriguez's savings, explaining that the technology fund is too volatile. Option D. Proceed with the investment as requested by Mr. Rodriguez, ensuring he signs a disclaimer acknowledging the high-risk nature of the fund. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the investment as requested by Mr. Rodriguez, ensuring he signs a disclaimer acknowledging the high-risk nature of the fund. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's immediate desire for a specific investment product and the advisor's fiduciary duty to ensure suitability based on a comprehensive understanding of the client's financial situation and risk tolerance. The advisor must navigate this by prioritizing regulatory compliance and ethical obligations over client pressure. The correct approach involves a thorough fact-finding process to establish the client's complete financial profile, investment objectives, and risk appetite before recommending any product. This aligns with the core principles of client protection and suitability mandated by the AIEP Professional Institute of the Andrés Bello University's regulatory framework. Specifically, it adheres to guidelines that require financial professionals to act in the best interests of their clients, ensuring that any recommendation is appropriate given their circumstances. This proactive and client-centric methodology prevents mis-selling and upholds the integrity of the advisory profession. An incorrect approach that involves immediately proceeding with the client's requested product without adequate due diligence fails to meet the suitability requirements. This constitutes a breach of regulatory obligations to assess the client's needs and risk profile, potentially exposing the client to unsuitable investments and leading to financial harm. Another incorrect approach, which involves vaguely mentioning risks without a detailed assessment or explanation tailored to the client's situation, also falls short. This superficial disclosure does not fulfill the duty to ensure the client truly understands the implications of the investment in relation to their personal circumstances. Finally, an approach that prioritizes the advisor's commission over the client's best interests is a clear ethical and regulatory violation, undermining the trust inherent in the advisor-client relationship. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive client needs assessment. This should be followed by a thorough analysis of available products against those needs, a clear explanation of risks and benefits tailored to the client, and a documented rationale for any recommendation. If a client insists on a product that appears unsuitable, the professional must engage in further dialogue, explain the concerns, and document the client's decision and understanding of the risks involved, while still upholding their duty to advise against unsuitable options. Question 6. Consider a scenario where a client, during a routine financial planning session, confides in their advisor about a past business transaction that, upon reflection, might have involved circumventing certain reporting requirements for tax purposes. The advisor is aware of the potential implications of such actions under relevant financial regulations. What is the most appropriate course of action for the advisor to take? Option A. Advise the client on the potential legal and regulatory consequences of their past actions, and if a clear regulatory breach is identified, report the matter to the appropriate authorities in accordance with established protocols, while maintaining client confidentiality where legally permissible. Option B. Assure the client that their disclosure is confidential and will not be reported, regardless of its potential regulatory implications. To maintain the client relationship, Option C. Immediately cease all professional engagement with the client and report the client's disclosure to the authorities without further consultation or assessment, citing a potential breach of regulations. Option D. Ignore the client's disclosure, assuming it pertains to a past event with no current relevance or obligation to report, and continue with the financial planning session as if no sensitive information was shared. The correct answer is A. Advise the client on the potential legal and regulatory consequences of their past actions, and if a clear regulatory breach is identified, report the matter to the appropriate authorities in accordance with established protocols, while maintaining client confidentiality where legally permissible. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the ethical and regulatory obligations of a financial advisor operating within the framework of the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University entrance exam. The core difficulty lies in balancing client confidentiality with the imperative to report potential regulatory breaches. A professional must exercise careful judgment to discern when a client's disclosure necessitates reporting, and when it falls within the bounds of permissible, albeit sensitive, information. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the AIEP Code of Ethics and relevant regulations concerning financial advice and reporting obligations. Specifically, it requires the advisor to assess whether the client's disclosure constitutes a clear indication of illegal activity or a violation of financial regulations that the advisor is obligated to report. If such a violation is evident and falls within the scope of mandatory reporting, the advisor must proceed with reporting while adhering to any established protocols for doing so, ensuring client confidentiality is maintained to the extent legally and ethically permissible. This aligns with the professional duty to uphold the integrity of the financial system and protect the public interest, as mandated by the AIEP ethical guidelines. An incorrect approach of immediately reporting the information without a proper assessment risks violating client confidentiality and potentially misinterpreting the client's statements, leading to unwarranted scrutiny or legal repercussions for the client. This fails to uphold the trust inherent in the advisor-client relationship. Another incorrect approach of ignoring the disclosure entirely, even if it suggests potential wrongdoing, constitutes a dereliction of professional duty and a violation of regulatory obligations to report suspicious activities. This could expose the advisor and the institution to significant penalties and damage the reputation of the profession. Failing to seek guidance from supervisors or legal counsel when uncertain about reporting obligations is also an incorrect approach, as it bypasses established internal controls and expert advice designed to navigate complex ethical and legal dilemmas. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a clear understanding of the advisor's ethical and regulatory duties. When faced with potentially reportable information, the professional should first attempt to clarify the client's statements and assess the nature and severity of any disclosed activity. If the activity appears to be a clear violation of laws or regulations, the next step is to consult internal policies and procedures, which may include seeking advice from a supervisor, compliance officer, or legal counsel. This consultative process ensures that the decision to report is well-informed, compliant with all applicable regulations, and ethically sound, prioritizing both client welfare and regulatory integrity. Question 7. Operational review demonstrates a potential shortfall in the AIEP Professional Institute of the Andrés Bello University's operating budget for the upcoming fiscal year. To address this, a proposal has been put forth to utilize aggregated, anonymized student academic performance data to create marketing materials that highlight program strengths, potentially leading to increased enrollment and revenue. However, this data was not explicitly collected for marketing purposes, and the proposed use might inadvertently create an impression of guaranteed success for all students. Considering the AIEP commitment to academic integrity and student welfare, which of the following approaches best aligns with its regulatory framework and ethical obligations? Option A. Proceed with using the anonymized student performance data for marketing, as it is aggregated and anonymized, thus mitigating privacy concerns and serving the financial health of the institution. Option B. Focus solely on the financial implications of the budget shortfall and implement the marketing strategy using student data, assuming that the benefits to the institution's financial stability outweigh potential concerns about data usage and marketing representation. Option C. Modify the student performance data slightly to present a more compelling narrative of success in the marketing materials, arguing that minor adjustments are standard practice in marketing to attract prospective students. Option D. Seek alternative, compliant methods to address the budget shortfall, such as exploring new grant opportunities, optimizing operational efficiencies, or initiating a targeted fundraising campaign, while ensuring all marketing efforts are transparent and based on verifiable, ethically sourced information. The correct answer is A. Proceed with using the anonymized student performance data for marketing, as it is aggregated and anonymized, thus mitigating privacy concerns and serving the financial health of the institution. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the immediate financial interests of the university and the long-term ethical and regulatory obligations concerning student welfare and academic integrity. The university's operational review highlights a potential shortfall, and the proposed solution involves leveraging student data in a manner that could compromise privacy and lead to misrepresentation of academic outcomes. Careful judgment is required to balance financial needs with adherence to the AIEP Professional Institute of the Andrés Bello University's governing regulations and ethical principles. The correct approach involves prioritizing the integrity of academic data and student privacy above immediate financial gains. This means seeking alternative, compliant methods to address the operational shortfall, such as exploring legitimate fundraising avenues, optimizing existing budgets, or seeking external grants, all while ensuring full transparency and adherence to the AIEP established policies and any relevant national educational or data protection laws. This approach upholds the trust placed in the institution by students, faculty, and the wider community, and aligns with the ethical imperative to act in the best interest of the students and the academic mission. An incorrect approach that involves using student performance data for marketing purposes without explicit consent or for misrepresenting program success would constitute a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This action would violate principles of data privacy and could lead to misleading prospective students, thereby undermining academic integrity and the reputation of the AIEP. Another incorrect approach, such as downplaying the operational shortfall to avoid scrutiny, would be a failure of transparency and accountability, potentially leading to more severe consequences if the issue is discovered later. Furthermore, an approach that involves pressuring academic departments to artificially inflate grades to improve marketing metrics would directly contravene academic standards and ethical conduct, jeopardizing the credibility of the degrees awarded. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory principles at play. This involves a thorough understanding of the AIEP internal policies, relevant national legislation concerning education and data protection, and general ethical codes of conduct for educational institutions. The next step is to assess the potential consequences of various courses of action, considering impacts on all stakeholders. Seeking advice from legal counsel or ethics committees within the AIEP is crucial when navigating complex situations. Ultimately, the decision must align with the institution's mission and values, prioritizing long-term sustainability and ethical reputation over short-term expediency. Question 8. The investigation demonstrates that a significant potential donor has approached the Professional Institute of the Bello University with an offer of substantial financial contribution. The donor has expressed a desire to remain anonymous and has not provided details regarding the origin of the funds, but has indicated a strong interest in influencing the direction of specific research programs within the university. What is the most appropriate course of action for the financial advisor representing the university in this situation? Adhering strictly to the internal regulations and ethical guidelines of the Bello University and relevant Venezuelan financial oversight bodies. Option A. Proceed with accepting the donation without further inquiry, assuming the donor's intentions are benevolent, given the significant financial benefit to the university's research initiatives. Option B. Immediately accept the donation in principle, subject to a later review of the donor's identity and fund origins, to secure the much-needed financial support for the research programs. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive due diligence process to verify the donor's identity, the legitimacy of the funds, and to assess any potential conditions or conflicts of interest, while adhering to the university's established policies for accepting donations and relevant Venezuelan financial regulations. Option D. Inform the donor that anonymity cannot be guaranteed and that all donations must be fully disclosed, regardless of the amount, as per university policy, and decline the offer if the donor insists on remaining anonymous. The correct answer is B. Immediately accept the donation in principle, subject to a later review of the donor's identity and fund origins, to secure the much-needed financial support for the research programs. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a financial advisor, acting on behalf of the Professional Institute of the Bello University, is approached by a potential donor with a significant offer of financial support. The challenge lies in balancing the institution's need for funding with the ethical and regulatory obligations to ensure that such donations are transparent, do not compromise academic integrity, and comply with the internal policies and external regulations governing financial institutions and educational bodies in Venezuela. The advisor must navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure that the donation process adheres to principles of good governance and fiduciary responsibility. The correct approach involves a thorough due diligence process, including verifying the source of funds, assessing any potential conditions attached to the donation, and ensuring compliance with the Bello University's established policies for accepting gifts and donations. This aligns with the regulatory framework that mandates transparency, accountability, and the prevention of illicit financial activities. Specifically, adherence to the internal statutes of the Bello University regarding financial contributions and any applicable Venezuelan laws concerning financial transparency and anti-money laundering would be paramount. The advisor's role is to act as a gatekeeper, ensuring that the donation serves the best interests of the university without introducing undue risk or compromising its ethical standing. An incorrect approach would be to immediately accept the donation without proper scrutiny. This could lead to accepting funds from an unethical or illegal source, potentially implicating the university in financial misconduct. Another incorrect approach would be to bypass established university procedures for donation acceptance, creating a lack of transparency and accountability. Furthermore, failing to assess any conditions attached to the donation could result in the university accepting funds that come with obligations that conflict with its mission or academic freedom, thereby violating ethical principles and potentially regulatory guidelines on institutional integrity. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying all relevant stakeholders and their interests. 2. Understanding the applicable internal policies and external regulations. 3. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment of the proposed donation. 4. Seeking appropriate internal approvals and legal counsel if necessary. 5. Documenting all steps taken and decisions made throughout the process. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-informed, defensible, and aligned with the highest professional standards. Question 9. The analysis reveals that a client of the AIEP Professional Institute's financial advisory services has expressed a strong and specific interest in investing a significant portion of their portfolio in a newly launched, highly speculative cryptocurrency. The client has emphasized their desire for rapid capital appreciation and has indicated they are willing to accept substantial risk. What is the most appropriate course of action for the financial advisor? Adhering strictly to the AIEP Professional Institute's regulatory framework and ethical guidelines. Option A. Advise the client that cryptocurrencies are too volatile and speculative for any investment and suggest they focus solely on traditional, low-risk investment products. Option B. Immediately execute the client's requested investment in the cryptocurrency, as the client has explicitly stated their willingness to accept high risk and their desire for rapid appreciation. Option C. Recommend a different, well-established cryptocurrency that the advisor believes is less risky, without conducting a full suitability assessment for the client's specific circumstances. Option D. Conduct a thorough suitability assessment to understand the client's overall financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment objectives, and then provide a detailed explanation of the risks and potential rewards of the cryptocurrency, offering it as a potential, albeit high-risk, component of a diversified portfolio if deemed suitable. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough suitability assessment to understand the client's overall financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment objectives, and then provide a detailed explanation of the risks and potential rewards of the cryptocurrency, offering it as a potential, albeit high-risk, component of a diversified portfolio if deemed suitable. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a financial advisor at the Bello University's Professional Institute is presented with a client who has expressed a strong desire to invest in a specific, high-risk cryptocurrency. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the client's stated wishes with the advisor's fiduciary duty and the regulatory obligations under the framework governing the AIEP Professional Institute. The advisor must exercise careful judgment to ensure that any recommendation aligns with the client's suitability profile, risk tolerance, and investment objectives, while also adhering to the Institute's internal guidelines and any applicable external regulations concerning investment advice and product suitability. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the client's financial situation, investment experience, and risk tolerance, followed by a detailed explanation of the risks associated with the proposed cryptocurrency investment. This approach is right because it upholds the advisor's fiduciary responsibility to act in the client's best interest. It aligns with the core principles of responsible financial advice, which mandate that recommendations must be suitable for the client. Specifically, under the AIEP Professional Institute's framework, advisors are expected to conduct comprehensive client due diligence and ensure that all investment proposals are adequately explained in terms of their potential risks and rewards, particularly for novel or volatile asset classes like cryptocurrencies. This ensures informed consent and protects the client from making decisions they may not fully understand or that are not aligned with their financial well-being. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the investment solely based on the client's expressed desire without adequate due diligence. This fails to meet the advisor's duty of care and suitability obligations. It exposes the client to undue risk and could lead to significant financial losses, potentially resulting in a breach of professional conduct and regulatory noncompliance. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the client's interest outright without exploring the underlying reasons or offering alternative, suitable investments. This demonstrates a lack of client engagement and could damage the professional relationship, failing to provide comprehensive financial guidance. A third incorrect approach would be to recommend the cryptocurrency without fully disclosing its speculative nature and the potential for complete loss of capital, thereby misleading the client about the true risk profile of the investment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, actively listen to and understand the client's objectives and preferences. Second, conduct a comprehensive client suitability assessment. Third, thoroughly research and understand any proposed investment, especially those in emerging or high-risk asset classes. Fourth, clearly communicate the risks, benefits, and alternatives to the client, ensuring they have a complete and unbiased understanding. Finally, document all advice and client interactions meticulously. Question 10. The audit findings indicate potential discrepancies in the financial reporting of a specific program managed by the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University. A senior auditor, who is a member of the institute, has directly shared these preliminary findings with a prominent external industry association before they have been formally reviewed or discussed internally by the institute's management or relevant committees. What is the most appropriate professional course of action for a member of the institute who becomes aware of this situation? Option A. Immediately report the auditor's actions to the institute's internal compliance department and request an investigation into the breach of protocol. Option B. Contact the external industry association to clarify the preliminary nature of the findings and emphasize that they are subject to internal review. Option C. Acknowledge the audit findings and initiate the formal internal review process for the program in question, while also discreetly informing the institute's leadership about the auditor's communication. Option D. Publicly address the potential discrepancies within the industry association to ensure transparency and prompt resolution. Correct answer is A. Immediately report the auditor's actions to the institute's internal compliance department and request an investigation into the breach of protocol. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because the audit findings, while potentially valid, have been communicated in a manner that bypasses established internal reporting channels. This raises concerns about transparency, due process, and the potential for undue influence or misinterpretation of information. Professionals must navigate the tension between addressing audit concerns promptly and respecting the established governance structures of the institution. The correct approach involves acknowledging the audit findings and initiating the formal internal review process. This respects the established protocols for handling such information, ensuring that all relevant parties are informed through the appropriate channels and that a structured evaluation can take place. This aligns with principles of good governance and institutional integrity, which are implicitly expected within the framework of a professional institute like the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University. By following the established procedures, the professional demonstrates adherence to the internal regulations and ethical standards that govern the institution's operations and the conduct of its members. An incorrect approach of directly addressing the audit findings with external stakeholders without prior internal consultation or approval would be professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the institution's internal review mechanisms, potentially leading to premature disclosure of sensitive information, misrepresentation of facts, or damage to the institution's reputation. It violates the principle of acting in the best interest of the institution and adhering to its established communication protocols. Another incorrect approach of ignoring the audit findings altogether is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of accountability and a disregard for the importance of internal controls and external scrutiny. It fails to address potential issues that could impact the institution's operations or reputation, and neglects the professional responsibility to engage with audit feedback constructively. A third incorrect approach of immediately implementing corrective actions based solely on the preliminary audit findings without a formal internal review process is also problematic. While proactive problem solving is valuable, doing so without proper validation and institutional consensus can lead to misallocation of resources, addressing non-existent issues, or implementing solutions that are not aligned with the institution's overall strategy or regulatory obligations. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Recognizing the importance of the audit findings. 2. Immediately initiating the established internal reporting and review procedures. 3. Communicating with relevant internal authorities, e.g., department heads, compliance officers, or the board, to ensure proper handling of the information. 4. participating constructively in the internal review process to understand the findings fully and contribute to appropriate responses. 5. Ensuring that any external communication regarding the audit is done through authorized channels and with institutional approval. Question 11. To address the challenge of a prospective candidate seeking assistance with the AIEP Professional Institute of the Andrew's Bello University entrance exam, which approach best upholds the integrity of the admissions process and adheres to the Institute's regulatory framework. Option A. Offer to coach the candidate on how to strategically guess answers during the exam, emphasizing techniques to maximize their score without needing to know all the material. Option B. Advise the candidate to network with current students who have already passed the exam to gather informal tips and insights on what to expect. Option C. Provide the candidate with access to official study guides and direct them to the Institute's website for information on exam structure and recommended preparation strategies. Option D. Share specific questions and answers from previous entrance exams, explaining that these are common types of questions to help the candidate prepare. The correct answer is C. Provide the candidate with access to official study guides and direct them to the Institute's website for information on exam structure and recommended preparation strategies. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge in managing client expectations and ensuring compliance with the AIEP Professional Institute of the Andrew's Bello University's entrance exam regulations, specifically concerning the integrity of the application process. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to assist a prospective candidate with the absolute necessity of adhering to the exam's rules, which are designed to ensure fairness and prevent any form of undue advantage. Careful judgment is required to uphold ethical standards and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves guiding the prospective candidate towards understanding and utilizing publicly available, official resources provided by the AIEP Professional Institute for exam preparation. This aligns with the regulatory framework by promoting transparency and equal opportunity for all applicants. Ethically, it upholds the principle of fairness and integrity in the admissions process. Specifically, the AIEP Professional Institute's guidelines for entrance exams emphasize that all candidates must prepare based on the official syllabus and materials, and any attempt to gain unauthorized access to or knowledge of exam content is strictly prohibited. Providing direct assistance with specific exam questions or content would violate these principles and potentially lead to disqualification. An incorrect approach would be to share specific questions or answers from past exams, even if presented as hypothetical examples. This directly contravenes the AIEP Professional Institute's regulations against compromising exam security and fairness. It creates an unfair advantage for the individual candidate and undermines the credibility of the entire entrance examination process. Such an action would be considered a serious ethical breach and a violation of the Institute's academic integrity policies. Another incorrect approach would be to offer to coach the candidate on how to guess or strategize answers without referring to official study materials. While seemingly less direct than providing answers, this still circumvents the intended preparation process and can be interpreted as an attempt to manipulate the exam outcome. It fails to equip the candidate with the necessary knowledge and understanding, and instead promotes a superficial approach that is contrary to the spirit of academic assessment. This also violates the principle of fair play and could be seen as an indirect form of academic dishonesty. A further incorrect approach would be to suggest that the candidate seek assistance from current students who have already taken the exam, implying they might share insights or tips. This opens the door to the dissemination of unofficial and potentially inaccurate information, and could also lead to the sharing of actual exam content, thereby compromising the exam's integrity. The AIEP Professional Institute's regulations are designed to ensure that all candidates are evaluated on their own merit and preparation, not on information obtained through informal and potentially illicit channels. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the governing regulations and ethical codes. When faced with a request that could potentially compromise integrity, a professional must first identify the relevant rules and principles. The next step is to consider the potential consequences of fulfilling or refusing the request. In this case, the paramount consideration is the adherence to the AIEP Professional Institute's entrance exam regulations and the ethical imperative to ensure a fair and transparent admissions process. The professional should then communicate clearly and respectfully to the candidate, explaining the limitations imposed by the regulations and directing them towards legitimate avenues of preparation. Question 12. The review process indicates that a faculty member at the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University has been accused of plagiarism in their published research. The Institute's Internal Ethics Committee has received anonymous complaints detailing specific instances of alleged academic dishonesty. The committee must decide on the immediate course of action to address these serious allegations while upholding the Institute's commitment to academic integrity and due process. Option A. Initiate a formal, confidential investigation by the Ethics Committee, gathering evidence from the accused faculty member and the complainants, and consulting the Institute's academic integrity policy and relevant educational regulations before making any determination or taking further action. Option B. Immediately publish the allegations and the names of the accused faculty member and complainants on the Institute's public website to ensure full transparency and deter future misconduct. Option C. Conduct a brief, informal discussion with the accused faculty member to gauge their reaction, and then proceed with disciplinary action based solely on their verbal response, without formal evidence gathering. Option D. Dismiss the anonymous complaints without further inquiry, citing the lack of direct evidence and the sensitive nature of the accusations, to avoid potential internal disruption. Correct answer is A. Initiate a formal, confidential investigation by the Ethics Committee, gathering evidence from the accused faculty member and the complainants, and consulting the Institute's academic integrity policy and relevant educational regulations before making any determination or taking further action. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential breach of ethical conduct and regulatory compliance within the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate and decisive action to uphold the integrity of the institution and protect the interests of its students and faculty. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough investigation with the imperative to act swiftly and ethically. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes transparency, fairness, and adherence to established internal policies and relevant educational regulations. This approach is right because it acknowledges the seriousness of the allegations, initiates a formal and impartial investigation, and ensures that all parties involved are treated with due process. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of good governance and ethical academic practice expected of an educational institution. By documenting all steps, seeking expert advice where necessary, and communicating appropriately, this approach safeguards the reputation of the AIEP Professional Institute and reinforces its commitment to academic integrity. An incorrect approach that involves immediate public disclosure without a prior internal investigation is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for due process and the potential for irreparable damage to the reputation of individuals involved before any wrongdoing is confirmed. It also bypasses established internal procedures designed to handle such sensitive matters discreetly and effectively. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the allegations due to their sensitive nature, represents a severe ethical and regulatory failure. This inaction allows potential misconduct to persist, undermining the trust placed in the institution by students, faculty, and the wider academic community. It also exposes the AIEP Professional Institute to significant reputational and potentially legal risks. A further incorrect approach, that of conducting a superficial and biased investigation, is also professionally unacceptable. This undermines the very purpose of an investigation, which is to ascertain facts impartially. A biased investigation can lead to unjust outcomes, further erode trust, and fail to address the root causes of the issue, potentially leading to recurring problems. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, acknowledge and document the allegations. Second, consult internal policies and relevant educational regulations to determine the appropriate procedural steps. Third, initiate a fair and impartial investigation, ensuring confidentiality where appropriate. Fourth, seek advice from legal counsel or relevant oversight bodies if the situation warrants. Finally, communicate findings and actions transparently and ethically, adhering to all procedural requirements. Question 13. What factors determine the appropriate course of action when a candidate for the AIEP Professional Institute's entrance exam, who is a relative of a prominent university official, performs below the established minimum score, but demonstrates significant extracurricular achievements relevant to the program. Option A. Strict adherence to the AIEP Professional Institute's regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for the entrance exam, prioritizing objective performance metrics over external affiliations or unquantified achievements. Option B. A subjective assessment of the candidate's overall potential, factoring in personal connections and perceived future contributions, to justify admission despite not meeting the exam's minimum requirements. Option C. Seeking informal guidance from other university officials to gauge the acceptability of a less stringent application of the entrance exam rules in this specific case. Option D. Consideration of the candidate's familial relationship with a university official and their extracurricular achievements as mitigating factors to potentially override the entrance exam score. The correct answer is A. Strict adherence to the AIEP Professional Institute's regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for the entrance exam, prioritizing objective performance metrics over external affiliations or unquantified achievements. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of academic admissions, specifically concerning the integrity of the entrance examination process at the Bello University. The challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to fair and merit-based admissions with the potential for undue influence or preferential treatment, which could undermine the credibility of the AIEP Professional Institute. Careful judgment is required to uphold the principles of transparency, fairness, and adherence to the established examination guidelines. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and strict application of the AIEP Professional Institute's specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for its entrance exam. This means prioritizing adherence to the documented procedures for candidate evaluation, ensuring that all admissions decisions are based solely on the criteria outlined in the official exam regulations. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the exam's mandate to assess candidates based on predetermined, objective standards, thereby ensuring a fair and equitable selection process. It upholds the integrity of the university's admissions and the professional standards expected of its candidates. An incorrect approach would be to consider external factors not explicitly permitted by the AIEP Professional Institute's regulations. For instance, prioritizing a candidate based on their family's affiliation with the university, without any regard for their performance on the entrance exam, represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This bypasses the established meritocratic system and introduces bias, violating the principle of equal opportunity and the spirit of the entrance examination. Another incorrect approach would be to interpret the exam guidelines loosely to accommodate a candidate who narrowly missed the required score, perhaps due to a perceived potential not quantifiable by the exam. This undermines the objective nature of the assessment and opens the door to subjective and potentially unfair decisions, deviating from the strict adherence required by the exam's framework. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic review of the relevant regulatory framework and ethical codes. Professionals must first identify the specific rules and guidelines governing the situation. Then, they should assess the facts of the case against these regulations, looking for clear directives or prohibitions. If ambiguity exists, seeking clarification from the appropriate governing body or supervisor is crucial. The ultimate decision should always prioritize adherence to the established rules and ethical principles, ensuring fairness, transparency, and the integrity of the professional process. Question 14. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential for reputational damage stemming from a perceived negative shift in public perception regarding the university's recent research funding initiatives, although no specific policy violations or factual inaccuracies have been identified. Which of the following represents the most appropriate initial response? Option A. Discontinue all new research funding initiatives temporarily until the perceived negative sentiment subsides, to avoid further exacerbating the situation. Option B. Advise all university staff to refrain from discussing the research funding initiatives externally until further notice to prevent any miscommunication. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive review of all communication materials related to the research funding initiatives and gather objective data on public sentiment and media coverage to assess the validity and scope of the perceived risk. Option D. Immediately issue a public statement clarifying the university's position on research funding and its commitment to ethical practices to preemptively address any potential negative sentiment. Correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive review of all communication materials related to the research funding initiatives and gather objective data on public sentiment and media coverage to assess the validity and scope of the perceived risk. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the identified risk, while potentially impactful, is based on a subjective interpretation of market sentiment rather than concrete data or established regulatory breaches. The challenge lies in balancing proactive risk management with the need for objective, evidence-based decision-making, as mandated by professional conduct standards. A premature or overly aggressive response based on speculation could lead to unnecessary resource allocation, reputational damage, or even regulatory scrutiny for unfounded actions. The correct approach involves a systematic and objective evaluation of the identified risk. This entails gathering further evidence to substantiate the initial concern, assessing the likelihood and potential impact using quantifiable metrics where possible, and considering the specific regulatory requirements of the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University. This aligns with the ethical duty of care and the principle of acting with due diligence, ensuring that any subsequent actions are proportionate and justified by a thorough understanding of the situation. Professional standards require that risk assessments be grounded in facts and logical analysis, not mere conjecture. An incorrect approach would be to immediately escalate the concern and implement drastic mitigation measures based solely on the initial subjective assessment. This fails to adhere to the principle of proportionality and could be seen as an overreaction, potentially violating the duty to act in the best interests of the institution and its stakeholders by causing undue alarm or disruption. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the concern entirely without further investigation, which would be a failure of the duty to identify and manage potential risks, however nascent they may appear. This neglects the proactive element of risk management and could leave the institution vulnerable if the perceived risk materializes. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the identified risk, followed by a rigorous process of evidence gathering and analysis. This involves consulting relevant internal policies, external regulatory guidelines, and seeking expert opinions if necessary. The decision to act, and the nature of that action, should be directly linked to the assessed level of risk and its potential consequences, always prioritizing objectivity and adherence to established professional and regulatory frameworks. Question 15. Stakeholder feedback indicates that some prospective clients of the Bello University's financial advisory services express a strong preference for highly speculative investment products, even when their stated financial goals and risk tolerance profiles suggest a more conservative approach. As a financial advisor operating under the AIEP Professional Institute's regulatory framework, how should you address this situation? Option A. Gently steer the client towards more conservative investment options that align with their stated financial goals and risk tolerance, explaining the rationale behind this recommendation. Option B. Proceed with the client's requested speculative investments after obtaining their written consent, assuming they understand the risks involved. Option C. Immediately reject the client's request for speculative investments and inform them that such products are not offered by the Institute. Option D. Implement the client's preferred speculative investment strategy without further discussion, prioritizing client satisfaction and the potential for high returns. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the client's requested speculative investments after obtaining their written consent, assuming they understand the risks involved. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's expressed desire for a specific investment strategy and the advisor's fiduciary duty to act in the client's best interest. Guided by the regulatory framework of the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University entrance exam, the advisor must navigate this by ensuring the client's understanding of risks and suitability, rather than simply complying with a request that may not align with their financial well-being. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the client's financial situation, investment objectives, and risk tolerance, followed by a clear explanation of why the requested strategy might be unsuitable. This aligns with the ethical principles and regulatory guidelines that mandate suitability and a client-centric approach. The advisor must prioritize the client's long-term financial health over immediate, potentially misinformed preferences. This requires open communication, education, and a commitment to acting in a manner that is demonstrably in the client's best interest, as stipulated by the AIEP professional conduct standards. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the client's requested strategy without a comprehensive suitability assessment. This fails to uphold the advisor's fiduciary duty and violates the principle of acting in the client's best interest. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's request outright without adequate explanation or exploration of alternatives. This can damage the client relationship and may not address the underlying reasons for the client's interest in the specific strategy. Finally, agreeing to the strategy solely to appease the client, despite recognizing its unsuitability, is a severe ethical breach and a direct contravention of regulatory requirements for professional conduct. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with active listening to the client's needs and concerns. This is followed by a rigorous analysis of the client's profile against the proposed strategy's characteristics, referencing relevant AIEP guidelines. If a mismatch is identified, the professional must clearly articulate the reasons for concern, educate the client on potential risks and alternative, more suitable options, and document all discussions and decisions thoroughly. The ultimate goal is to arrive at a mutually agreed-upon course of action that is both aligned with the client's objectives and compliant with professional and regulatory standards. Question 16. Process analysis reveals that client of the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University, who has expressed a strong desire to invest a significant portion of their portfolio in a single, highly speculative asset class due to recent media attention, is seeking your professional advice. You have assessed that this strategy carries substantial risk and is not aligned with their stated long-term financial security goals. Which of the following approaches best reflects the professional conduct expected under the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University's regulatory framework and ethical guidelines? Option A. Advise the client on the significant risks associated with their proposed investment. Explain how it deviates from their stated long-term objectives and present alternative, diversified investment strategies that align with their risk tolerance and goals, while respecting their ultimate decision-making authority. Option B. Immediately execute the client's requested investment in the speculative asset class, as their instructions are clear and the professional's role is to fulfill client directives. Option C. Politely decline to provide advice on this specific investment, stating that it falls outside your area of expertise, without offering any alternative solutions. Option D. Proceed with the investment as requested by the client, but include a disclaimer that absolves you of all responsibility for any potential losses incurred. The correct answer is A. Advise the client on the significant risks associated with their proposed investment. Explain how it deviates from their stated long-term objectives and present alternative, diversified investment strategies that align with their risk tolerance and goals, while respecting their ultimate decision-making authority. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's stated wishes and the potential for those wishes to lead to outcomes that may not be in their best long-term interest, or that could violate ethical guidelines. The professional must navigate this delicate balance, prioritizing client well-being and adherence to professional standards over immediate client demands. Careful judgment is required to ensure that advice provided is both compliant with the regulatory framework of the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University and ethically sound, fostering a trusting and responsible client relationship. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and long-term objectives, coupled with a clear explanation of the implications and potential consequences of their preferred investment strategy. This approach prioritizes fiduciary duty and client best interest, as mandated by the ethical codes and regulatory guidelines governing professionals associated with the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University. It requires transparent communication about risks, diversification, and the alignment of investments with stated goals, ensuring the client is fully informed to make decisions that are both aligned with their desires and professionally responsible. An incorrect approach that solely focuses on executing the client's immediate, potentially ill-advised. Request without further due diligence or counsel fails to uphold the professional's duty of care. This would represent a regulatory and ethical failure by not acting in the client's best interest and potentially exposing them to undue risk. Another incorrect approach, which involves dismissing the client's wishes outright without attempting to understand the underlying motivations or providing alternative, suitable recommendations, demonstrates a lack of client centricity and may damage the professional relationship, potentially violating ethical principles of respect and diligence. A third incorrect approach, which involves providing advice that is technically compliant but does not adequately address the client's broader financial context or long-term aspirations, also falls short of professional best practice by offering incomplete or superficial guidance. Professional decision-making in such situations should follow a framework that begins with active listening to understand the client's needs and concerns. This is followed by a comprehensive assessment of the client's financial profile and objectives. Subsequently, the professional must analyze potential strategies, considering regulatory compliance, ethical implications, and the client's best interests. Finally, transparent communication and education are crucial, empowering the client to make informed decisions while the professional provides expert guidance and ensures adherence to all applicable standards. Question 17. The risk matrix shows a high probability of significant loss for a particular investment product, yet the client has indicated a high tolerance for risk. The professional is aware that this product offers a higher commission for the firm. Considering the ethical and regulatory framework of the AIEP Professional Institute, which of the following actions best upholds professional responsibility? Option A. Recommend the investment product, highlighting its potential for high returns and the client's stated high risk tolerance, without disclosing the higher commission structure to avoid influencing the client's decision. Option B. Recommend a different investment product that offers a moderate return with low risk, even though it does not align with the client's stated high risk tolerance, to ensure the client's capital is protected. Option C. Decline to recommend the investment product, explaining to the client that despite their stated risk tolerance, the inherent risks, as indicated by the risk matrix, may not align with their overall financial well-being and suggesting alternative low-risk options. Option D. Recommend the investment product, emphasizing its potential for high returns and noting the client's stated high risk tolerance, while also clearly disclosing the higher commission structure. The correct answer is D. Recommend the investment product, emphasizing its potential for high returns and noting the client's stated high risk tolerance, while also clearly disclosing the higher commission structure. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the candidate to interpret a risk matrix, a common tool in financial risk management, and apply it to a specific ethical and regulatory context relevant to the Bello University entrance exam for the AIEP Professional Institute. The challenge lies in moving beyond a purely quantitative understanding of risk to a qualitative and ethically grounded application, considering the implications for client interests and regulatory compliance within the specified jurisdiction. Careful judgment is required to identify the most appropriate course of action when faced with potential conflicts of interest and the need to uphold professional standards. The correct approach involves prioritizing the client's best interests and adhering to the ethical guidelines and regulatory framework of the AIEP Professional Institute. This means recognizing that even if a high-risk investment aligns with the client's stated risk tolerance, a professional duty of care and fiduciary responsibility may necessitate a more conservative recommendation or further due diligence to ensure the client fully understands the potential downsides. The regulatory framework for financial professionals in this jurisdiction emphasizes transparency, suitability, and the avoidance of conflicts of interest. Therefore, a recommendation that appears to exploit a client's potential lack of understanding or is driven by personal gain, even if technically within a broad risk tolerance, would be ethically and regulatorily unsound. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the client's stated risk tolerance, without further consideration, fails to acknowledge the professional's duty to ensure suitability and understanding. This can lead to regulatory breaches related to client protection and suitability requirements. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes potential commission or firm profit over client well-being directly violates fiduciary duties and ethical codes of conduct, exposing the professional and the institution to significant regulatory penalties and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach that involves misrepresenting the risks or benefits of an investment, even if it appears to align with the client's stated tolerance, constitutes a severe ethical and regulatory violation, bordering on fraud. The professional decision-making process in such situation should involve a systematic evaluation. First, understand the client's objectives, risk tolerance, and financial situation comprehensively. Second, identify all potential investment options and their associated risks and rewards. Third, assess these options against the client's profile, considering not just stated tolerance, but also the client's capacity to understand and absorb potential losses. Fourth, evaluate any potential conflicts of interest and ensure transparency. Fifth, consult the relevant ethical codes and regulatory guidelines of the AIEP Professional Institute to ensure compliance. Finally, make a recommendation that demonstrably serves the client's best interests, supported by clear and honest communication. Question 18. The performance metrics show a significant surge in applications for specialized financial programs at the AIEP Professional Institute, leading to a higher than anticipated enrollment in these areas. Considering the AIEP commitment to academic rigor and the regulatory framework set by the Ministry of Popular Power for Education, MPPE, what is the most appropriate next step for the Institute's admissions committee? Option A. Relax the admission standards for the specialized financial programs to ensure that the higher number of applicants can be admitted, thereby maximizing enrollment figures. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entrance examinations design and scoring for the specialized financial programs to ensure it accurately assesses candidates' aptitude and preparedness for these specific fields, and adjust the exam or its administration if necessary, while ensuring compliance with MPPE guidelines. Option C. Increase the overall difficulty of the AIEP entrance examination for all programs to filter out less qualified candidates, irrespective of their chosen specialization. Option D. Immediately expand the capacity of the specialized financial programs to accommodate the increased enrollment, without altering the current admission examination process. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the entrance examinations design and scoring for the specialized financial programs to ensure it accurately assesses candidates' aptitude and preparedness for these specific fields, and adjust the exam or its administration if necessary, while ensuring compliance with MPPE guidelines. Explanation. The performance metrics show a significant increase in student enrollment in specialized financial programs at the Bello University. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the AIEP Professional Institute to balance the demand for these programs with the ethical and regulatory obligations to ensure the quality of education and the suitability of admitted students. The challenge lies in maintaining academic integrity and institutional reputation while responding to market demand, all within the specific regulatory framework governing higher education entrance exams in Venezuela, as overseen by the Ministry of Popular Power for Education, MPPE, and the AIEP internal guidelines. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the admission process to identify any potential systemic biases or oversights that might have contributed to the enrollment surge, particularly in specialized programs. This includes evaluating the effectiveness of the entrance exam in assessing candidates' aptitude for these specific fields, and ensuring that the exam adheres strictly to the AIEP-established academic standards and the MPPE directives for university admissions. Focus should be on data-driven adjustments to the exam's design or administration to better align with program requirements and institutional goals, thereby upholding the principle of merit-based admission and ensuring that admitted students are well prepared for their chosen fields of study. This aligns with the AIEP mandate to provide quality education and the MPPE oversight to maintain academic standards across Venezuelan higher education institutions. An incorrect approach would be to immediately expand program capacity without a critical assessment of the admission process. This fails to address the underlying reasons for the enrollment increase and could lead to a dilution of academic quality if the entrance exam is not adequately assessing preparedness for specialized financial studies. It also risks violating the MPPE regulations on maintaining program standards and could damage the AIEP reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to simply increase the difficulty of the entrance exam across the board without specific analysis of the specialized financial programs. This might inadvertently penalize qualified candidates for other programs and does not address the specific aptitude requirements for financial studies. It also fails to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of the enrollment trends and the specific needs of the specialized programs, potentially leading to a mismatch between student capabilities and program demands. A further incorrect approach would be to prioritize enrollment numbers over the integrity of the admission process, perhaps by lowering admission standards to accommodate the increased demand. This directly contravenes the AIEP commitment to academic excellence and the MPPE mandate to ensure that all admitted students meet the necessary qualifications, potentially leading to higher dropout rates and a decline in the perceived value of the degrees offered. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multifaceted approach. First, a data-driven analysis of enrollment trends and performance metrics. Second, a critical review of the admission criteria and examination methodologies in relation to program-specific requirements. Third, consultation with academic departments to understand their capacity and needs. And finally, adherence to all relevant regulations from the MPPE and internal AIEP policies to ensure fair, equitable, and academically sound admission practices. Question 19. Quality control measures reveal that a candidate submitted academic transcripts for the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University entrance exam appear to have inconsistencies with their self-reported academic history. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the admissions committee to take? Option A. Proceed with the application without addressing the discrepancies to avoid delays. Option B. Immediately disqualify the candidate due to the detected inconsistencies. Option C. Contact the candidate informally to ask for a verbal explanation of the discrepancies. Option D. Initiate a formal review process to investigate the inconsistencies and request clarification from the candidate. The correct answer is B. Immediately disqualify the candidate due to the detected inconsistencies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a candidate's application for admission to the AIEP Professional Institute of the Bello University is found to contain potentially misleading information. The challenge lies in balancing the institute's commitment to academic integrity and fair admission processes with the need to thoroughly investigate and provide the candidate with an opportunity to respond, all while adhering to the institute's internal regulations and applicable educational laws in Venezuela. The professional must exercise sound judgment to avoid premature judgment or unfair dismissal, ensuring due process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves initiating a formal review process as stipulated by the AIEP Professional Institute's admission regulations. This process typically includes notifying the candidate of the discrepancy, requesting clarification or supporting documentation, and allowing the candidate a reasonable period to respond. This aligns with principles of natural justice and the Institute's commitment to fair evaluation, ensuring that decisions are based on verified information and that candidates are not unfairly disadvantaged. The regulatory framework of the Bello University, as it pertains to admissions, would mandate such procedural fairness. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately reject the application based solely on the initial discrepancy without further investigation or allowing the candidate to present their case. This violates the principles of due process and fairness enshrined in educational regulations, potentially leading to an unjust outcome and reputational damage for the institute. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the discrepancy and proceed with the application as if no issue exists. This compromises the integrity of the admission process and the quality of candidates admitted, failing to uphold the institute's standards and potentially admitting individuals who do not meet the required qualifications or ethical benchmarks. A third incorrect approach is to contact the candidate informally and request a verbal explanation without a formal record or established procedure. This lacks the rigor and transparency required for official admission processes, making it difficult to document the review and potentially leading to inconsistent application of rules. It also bypasses the established internal review mechanisms designed to ensure fairness and compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should follow a structured decision-making process. 1. Identify the discrepancy and its potential implications for the admission criteria. 2. Consult the AIEP Professional Institute's internal regulations and relevant Venezuelan educational laws governing admissions. 3. Initiate the formal review process ensuring all communication and documentation are handled according to established procedures. 4. Provide the candidate with clear information about the discrepancy and their rights to respond. 5. Evaluate the candidate's response and any supporting evidence objectively. 6. Make a decision based on verified facts and adherence to regulatory requirements. 7. Document the entire process thoroughly. Question 20. The control framework reveals an urgent need to communicate a significant policy change approved by the AIEP Professional Institute's governing board to its members and the wider professional community. However, the detailed implementation guidelines for this policy are still under final review by a specialized committee, and some aspects are subject to minor adjustments. The Institute's communication department is eager to announce the approval to demonstrate responsiveness and proactive governance. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the AIEP Professional Institute's ethical and regulatory obligations? Option A. Release a partial announcement focusing only on the aspects of the policy that are fully finalized, without mentioning the parts still under review. Option B. Issue a preliminary statement acknowledging the board's approval of the policy in principle, outlining the general intent and scope, and committing to providing the complete implementation guidelines by a specific, realistic date after internal verification. Option C. Announce the policy change immediately, stating that full implementation details will follow once finalized. Option D. Delay any public announcement until all implementation details are fully finalized and approved, to avoid any potential for misinterpretation. Correct answer is C. Announce the policy change immediately, stating that full implementation details will follow once finalized. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need for timely information dissemination and the imperative to ensure accuracy and compliance with the AIEP Professional Institute's ethical guidelines and internal policies regarding public statements. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of communicating important developments with the responsibility to verify information and avoid misrepresentation, which could mislead stakeholders or damage the Institute's reputation. The correct approach involves a structured process of internal review and verification before any public announcement. This entails confirming the accuracy of the information with the relevant departments or individuals, ensuring it aligns with the Institute's official stance, and obtaining necessary approvals. This method upholds professional integrity by prioritizing truthfulness and transparency, adhering to the AIEP Professional Institute's commitment to responsible communication and ethical conduct, as outlined in its foundational principles, and any applicable internal regulations governing public relations and information disclosure. An incorrect approach of immediately releasing unverified information to the public risks significant ethical and regulatory breaches. This failure to verify information constitutes a misrepresentation, potentially violating principles of honesty and accuracy expected of professionals associated with the AIEP Professional Institute. Another incorrect approach, that of delaying communication indefinitely without a clear plan for verification or a statement acknowledging the ongoing process, can lead to speculation and distrust, undermining the Institute's credibility and potentially violating guidelines on proactive and transparent communication where appropriate. A third incorrect approach, that of selectively releasing partial information without full context, can be misleading and manipulative, violating the ethical duty to provide complete and accurate information. Professionals facing such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Assessing the urgency and potential impact of the information. 2. Identifying the source and verifying its credibility. 3. Consulting internal policies and ethical guidelines for public communication. 4. Developing a communication strategy that ensures accuracy, completeness, and timeliness, including obtaining necessary approvals. 5. If immediate release is not possible, communicating the status of the information gathering process to relevant internal stakeholders.